Start recording.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. So we're here to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that have been affecting small businesses in general, but seem to have a major impact on food and beverage. Inflation, supply chain, client issues, and staffing, to name a few. I thought we'd put a little town hall together featuring our food and beverage consultants that we have available to all our clients. We have Jay Moore here, who's a Low Country native, community advocate, business owner, and professional chef, a graduate from Johnson & Wales University. He has over 18 years of experience as a business owner and a chef. His cooking combines traditional Southern cuisine with classical and contemporary techniques. A business professional who owns and operates a successful catering company called Lily Ollie Lifestyle and Catering. Prior to COVID, Jay had 2 large contracts with Charleston and Myrtle Beach airports, providing daily food deliveries. He has managed over 1,500 people, operating restaurants that have had annual sales of over $4 million in revenue. Volunteers his time and talent with the Low Country Food Bank, teaching classes. And Jay is the only professional chef elected to any state house in the United States of America, as he represents us as a state representative in South Carolina. And we also have Tyler Rothenberg, MBA, hospitality professional specializing in front of house operations, beverage strategy, and consumer engagement. Award-winning beverage professional with multiple national publications, experience in but not limited to restaurant operations, financial management, menu curation, channel strategies, team development, and event execution. Rothenberg has worked every position in a restaurant from dishwasher to GM. He also has extensive experience working in the alcoholic beverage space as a production assistant, sales rep, field marketing manager, and brand ambassador. Rothenberg is a veteran of the United States Army, currently serves as the Charleston United States Bartenders Guild president, and sits on the College of Charleston MBA alumni board. So those are a little information on the consultants that we have available to our clients. And I thought I would have Tyler, well, let's have J.A. Tell us a few things, and then we'll have Tyler join in shortly after that.
Hi, everybody. Brad, it's good to see you again. And for those that are getting this recording, I look forward to speaking with y'all in person or via Zoom. I think Charlie did a really good job of giving my resume. I think the main thing that I like to work with people on is really getting to know your business model, some of what your challenges are, and kind of working out a strategy from the individual basis. I've done everything as far as restaurant types, from a small independent restaurant owner and catering company to doing real estate in restaurants with the Summers Corner project, to now my latest joint venture would be another project in the airport I can't talk a lot about, with a pretty well-known entertainer from this area. So I'm looking forward to really figuring out ways in which we can expand what you all are doing and also get through some of the challenges. And we all know right now, with supply chain and also labor challenges, I mean, getting nimble, kind of reinventing what you all do, and what we do in the industry is vitally important. But yeah, I'm a resource. Please utilize the resource. I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you all that would like me to. You know, Charlie did a good job of doing my resume. I could talk for on and on about things, but I think the main thing is talking to you all specifically what your challenges are, and kind of working with you all. Charlie has my email address and phone number. So yeah, let's be in contact. And Tyler, looking forward to hear, because he's a more like military background, so he's going to give you a more regimented, detailed approach to solving some problems. So yeah, so I'm happy to work with him on stuff too.
Yeah, we'll see about the regiment. No, I thank you, Jay. I'll make a few comments that I love. I know it's limited crowd, but try to turn this into a conversational opportunity of sorts. I think that's always valuable. You know, the first thing that I want to really mention is these challenges right now, they're not necessarily as unique as they may feel. And what I mean by that is when you look around, you'll hear all industries talk about how they're short staffed, and you'll hear all industries discuss their supply chain issues, and you'll hear all industries, talk about managing labor, all perspectives of that. And why that's important is that is the cost of doing business. And what we have to realize is that when the economy throws curveballs our way and we face certain economic challenges that are noticeable, we have to adjust and adapt as business owners. And firstly, that means looking at your operation as exactly that, an operation in a business. And what I mean by that is sometimes you have to take a step back and you have to remove the emotion, which is challenging for us because you all started your business because it's something you believe in, something you're passionate about, something you want to share with the world, something you care about, something you're good at. But you have to be able to remove that emotional capacity shortly and look at your business from the lens of how do I reduce cost? How do I manage my labor? How do I manage my inventory? Maybe I have to take this one item I really love off the menu because it's not producing for me. It's not driving revenue. It's not driving sales or visibility. It's not increasing, my number one goal as a business, and that's profitability. Maybe I have to look at my hours, right? A challenge that I constantly see from restaurant owners specifically, and I understand, but the fact is, it's this what if scenario. Monday nights only accounts for 2% of our total business, but what if we get busy? What if we have that one pop? What if we have a record night on a Monday? Well, the truth is your historical data over the past year tells you you're not going to. And by staying open for those additional 5 hours, 6 hours, X number of hours, you're costing your business money. Right. And you have to be able to rationally look at those scenarios. And you also, what's extremely important is you have to be able to understand your data. You have to collect your data. You have to manage your data. You have to organize your data. You have to be able to read your data. You're spending money on POS systems for a very specific reason, and that's to have these systems collect this data for you so you can make educated decisions for your business. And if you're not managing that, that is an asset and resource that you are neglecting. And that's something that's extremely important to use. As example, looking at your sales, looking at sales mix and being able to say over a 6-month period, out of X number of menu items, these last 2 menu items are only making, accounting for 2% of sales. And they're costing me X to keep on the menu. Why are they on the menu? Looking at your hours, as I discussed on a Monday, and saying, well, Monday nights only account for 2% of my total business. Why are you open? But the data has to lead to you asking those questions and making difficult decisions. I think that's my I horse for the moment.
You're good.
Do we have any questions for Tyler or J.A.? Tara, Gail, Sandy, Brad?
I've got one.
Brad's got a question.
So I challenge you on the profitability is the number one goal of all businesses. There are businesses out there, such as mine,
Sure.
that it's experience driven. But with that experience being elevated to that's the highest quality that we try to do.
Mhm.
That's where we get our profitability. So it's like with this comes. So I agree with you that's profitability, but some businesses out there, and it's not just mine, there are other service related businesses that are the same, where it's about service and then the profitability comes as well. So the kind of time.
Service drives profitability.
That's, yes, instead of, because you hear all the time about number one job, profitability. So there are people that have a mission that go with that first. Profitability is there, and the guy's running the numbers, he wants the profitability. But the mission, if they coincide, they can be very successful. But my main question to both of you is that how do you challenge yourselves? Like when we started Coastal Coffee Roasters and all the other businesses I've started, we had a vision in mind of sustainability.
Sure.
And sustainability was great. And we live in the Charleston Low Country market. A lot of people move to this area that have those similar views and passions about sustainability.
Mhm.
Then you have a pandemic.
Mhm.
Then you have the supply chain issue. So even if you're still driven on the mission, the sustainability stuff, then it becomes unavailable. Then you're like, oh crap, now what do? So then you pivot like you do in every business, because if you don't, you die. At what point do you say, I can't raise the price of a product, but it goes against, I have to raise the price of the product if I want to stay sustainable, or I can go the same way of like plastic and keep it where it's reasonably perceived from the public or your customer base. It's this challenge of how do I stay with my vision and dreams of being a sustainable company?
Mhm.
But yet the supply chain issues and such. So that's my questions to you. How do you address that?
Well, I mean, that's a really good, I mean, that's happening right now. I mean, I know, for example, there's a coffee shop in Goose Creek. I'm gonna say the name of it, but it's a coffee shop in Goose Creek. Guy's just a friend of mine. He's not a client or anything, just a friend. I go there probably once or twice a week. And he dealt with something very similar. You know, we all know the cost of the plastic cups, for example.
My customers.
Yeah, I mean, the ice cups, and he gets the eco-friendly ones, like, just like you. And he struggled for, most of the pandemic because his whole position was he did not raise the prices.
Yeah.
That was his whole thing. He was just not gonna raise prices. So what he originally started doing is really promoting the bring your own
Yeah.
cup concept, right? And then eventually he had to raise prices, but what he did, because of his mission of sustainable, he just communicated honestly with his customer base. And I think that's one of the main things you have to do once you build in that trust with your customer base, specifically with companies that have a mission behind them, like being clear,
Yeah.
communicating with your customer base. And for him, for example, his customer base saw him not raising prices and saw him doing everything not to raise prices with the bring your own cup concept. And eventually, it's just like anything else, though your mission is your mission, it's at the end of the day, it's still a business.
Right. And
To his point,
That's the point. You still have profitability.
if you don't, I mean, unless you're gonna have a nonprofit component, that's gonna,
but they still have to have.
exactly. So it's sticking to what and I don't think you compromise that mission as far as the product. You have to communicate with your customer, hey, this is why we're transitioning to raising prices, this is the why.
Yeah.
And being transparent with it
Mhm.
as much as you can, as far as like, I'm not doing it to make my profit higher. This is literally just to cover costs, and there's creative ways you can do it. And I think the best way is just talking to your staff about it, so your staff understands
Them
it.
in the face.
You know what I mean? But having a real conversation
Yeah.
with your staff about it, instead of just raising it, and then you may be talking to your customers directly about it, but your staff not understanding it, and then they're giving a different message to your clients.
Mhm. Well, and to the profitability piece, I think that's why, and I do focus on hammering that in, is I grew up in hospitality, started working 12 years old. I mean, I born and raised in hospitality, and the service and aspect is everything. But you can have the best product with the best service, the best environment, the best ambiance, the best staff. If you're negative, your business is gonna close.
This is true.
Period. Right? So like, all of those avenues should drive profit. But then if there's something like the situation you're just talking about that interrupts the profitability of the business,
Yeah.
then you have to look at that one factor and figure out how to adjust. And that was a great point that you just brought up. And I also think it's very important, and I've learned kind of in restaurant businesses, I don't always see this. So I manage a couple liquor brands nationally. And one thing that we do before we make any decisions is we have a structured brand plan. Right? And our brand plan, I mean, it identifies, everything from the mission, the vision, values, ethos, things like that. to who our target demographic is, to how our marketing strategy is going to be, to, pivot strategies, but everything, it's our playbook that we try and it's a living document, but that we reflect upon when we run into these challenges to remind ourselves of that why. Right, so like, I think it's always important, and I do this personally as a practice, is like, why am I doing this? And you can't lose sight of that. So like, if sustainability is your why, you absolutely, period, cannot change that. But it's the how piece. How do I remain sustainable while in honoring my vision, while I am reminding myself that I have to be profitable to do so. And where that comes in too, I think, like, as an example, maybe let's talk about sustainable straws, is you have to explore all of your options. What sustainable straw options exist? Who are the vendors that carry these straws? How do I create and build relationships to hopefully negotiate terms on these straws? How can I provide the best possible product at the lowest possible price? And I know the biggest challenge there that I see is it's extremely time consuming, and the response is typically, well, I have to run my business, I have to be in the business, and that leads to the staffing issue, right? I know it's a snowball effect, for sure.
Or do you pivot and offer something completely different? Like a lid that has a hole in it rather than.
Right, yeah, well, that's the.
Sure. So, yeah.
Starbucks kind of, to that point, kind of moved to that because it's more cost effective. And to what Tyler was talking about earlier, I think before the call technically started, I mean, there's something to be said, and I know you're big on community. It's like, there are other businesses that have similar missions.
Yeah.
Like, could you go then to your distributor as a collective and negotiate prices? You know what I mean? Like, that's another way to kind of look at it too. I know one of the things we did when we first opened Black Bean Company 12 years ago was, we spent a lot of time, because, we were kind of one of the first people out of the box that were doing sustainable and vegan friendly and stuff. And those products then were a lot more expensive percentage wise than they are now, because more people are using them. There's number 8 boxes or number 3 boxes, for example. And what we would do is, it was time consuming, but we dedicated, twice a month where we would renegotiate with like US Foods and Cisco and be like, hey, Cisco is giving us this price for the boxes. Can you match it? And they could match it, we go to Cisco.
Mm-hmm.
And it would just, so again, I think that's.
To your point, with that snowballing effect, it's like you're running your business and then you pretty much have to have an additional staff to go through all of those aspects to sustain profitability. But at the same time, it's like, you gotta look out for yourself a little bit. Like, where's the best place coming?
You have to, and what I recommend, and I know this to the time piece can be challenging, but I'm turned into a spreadsheet nerd, and once you create, and it doesn't have to be anything extremely complex, but you spend the time up front to do your diligence on vendors and prices, materials, options, all of that, and you build these spreadsheets. Then in the future, all you have to do is come back and make minor adjustments, right? But what I think is really important is creating the systems and processes up front to do the back end management for you, and try to almost automate some of that, where you can alleviate, where you're not going in every single time and manually, researching. And then you have to create, I'm a huge relationship person, like huge. In the spirits business, like, it's all about what distributors you're working with, what suppliers you're working with, creating and harvesting relationships long-term, to then know that you can pick up the phone and call this person and explain situations, negotiate terms and deals. But again, you have to put that upward front to create those relationships. Like, how well do you know all of your vendors? Like, do you have really great relationships with them? And if you don't, why not? And if there's a reason you don't, then why are you there?
Yeah. No, and as an example of that, before coming here and sorry, I was late, going to just Praxair, or now it's Lindy, and going in and exchanging nitrogen grade tanks. Well, the guy looks up, he knows who I am, has conversations. He says, oh, I see you're being charged $28. What, you weren't paying $28 for these, were you? I said, no, I was somewhere down at $20 range. I said, but I haven't been the person coming to get them recently. And he was like, and he took care of it and was able to lower my price just because of that face-to-face relationship building that was done years ago.
Absolutely.
So it's like you still have to stay in the business.
I think sometimes it's a balance too between price and those kinds of things and relationships, right?
Yeah.
Like you kind of want to sometimes be a good customer to maybe less distributors as opposed to hitting everybody for the best price, because sometimes in the long haul, I think that may hurt you if you're not careful.
It's a balance, that's for
It's
sure.
a balance. I want to ask you guys and everybody, if anybody on the call has any opinion. Building staff is a very big issue. What are creative ways that people can build loyalty in staff? I know a lot of the loyalty type of things that I see with, working remotely and changing hours and flex hours and stuff like that don't really work ideally for the restaurant industry.
That would be nice if people could work remote.
Happy hour.
The hostess is working remotely today.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if anybody had some tips on building loyalty in staff.
For me, like, and this has just been true my, almost 20-year career. The main thing that works, that has worked for me, and the main thing that hasn't worked when I don't practice it, is the number one, and all of you restaurant folks know this, is scheduling. That's the main thing, not people like as business owners, not respecting people's, like when they request time off, or, and now it's a bigger challenge when a person is scheduled a shift, when the shift ends, that's when the shift ends. And not pushing them to work overtime. I mean, finding, but it goes back to doing some of that upfront work that Tyler was talking about, where you're organizing your business in a way as far as your flow, where you can respect people's time. Because to me, that's the number one reason people quit jobs or don't be loyal, is when their time isn't respected. That's been my experience throughout my career. Like, if I respect someone's time and give them the tools that they need to do their job. Because another thing is, if you're at a job or restaurant or whatever, and you don't have all the supplies you need to do your job, that's the second thing. And again, that comes in for having your systems in place where you're not running out of product and properly communicating once you do. Because it's one thing to be midway through your shift and you're about to pull another, you're about to go to the back to pull a case of Mick Ultra and it's out. And the owner or the manager knew it was out when they restocked that last 12-pack but didn't communicate. So communication, respecting people's schedules, and and having the proper tools, I think, to do. But it's basic stuff to me is what always worked for me.
It is very basic and it isn't. And I you don't want to jump on a plane to Chicago and have to go get raw supplies.
Yeah, I've done it. I've done it. I've literally done it.
I heard, and I'm gonna get back into this, but one of my favorite sayings I've ever heard is a sign of a good manager is when a restaurant runs without them being there. Right? And what I've learned in my experience in restaurants is there are a lot of personalities that feel they have to be there. And the reason they feel they have to be there is because they take the hands-on approach and they do everything themselves. And that's not good for business. It's not. What is good for business is creating the systems, the structures, the processes clearly, precisely communicated, properly, in which employees have no guesswork. Like, you should be able to have a handbook, everything labeled, recipes, clock in, whatever it is, easily accessible where someone can walk in without knowing anything and have a guide of how to do something. And that, when it comes to really, I think creating an environment for employees is important because let's be honest, most employees at the labor level, if you will, anyone not in management, they want to show up, make money and go home. Or they would be in management, or they would be pushing you to teach them more. And their life, they're happy when they can do that and they typically perform at a more optimal level because they're not having to guess where things are, or they don't feel flustered and frustrated because things aren't available for the items, products aren't there, whatever it may be. Another thing I think is very important.
Real quick, Tyler, to your point, Sarah Gale just made a great comment from tradesmen. She says, we hire for our culture, not skills. I can teach skills, but I am a brewery, not a restaurant.
1000%.
Yeah, so that's kind of the point you're sort of making, where you gotta make it a good place to work, and you can teach them the skills that they may need.
1000%. And when you hire based upon kind of the intangible characteristics of being a good human, and that this is actually, I hope I don't get too distracted here. This starts with the interview process. This starts with 1000%. Like, and how I know, and most of us probably the same situation, like when I've gone through professional interviews for large corporations, they take 5 months. When you go through an interview for a restaurant, it takes 30 minutes and you're hired, if that. Right? And that's, are you alive? Yeah, do you have a pulse?
Right.
Right? And though I understand hands, I also think you have to do your due diligence in creating an interview process that gives you an idea of who the human is. And then that human will provide you value and will want to learn naturally, hopefully. And then that leads to understanding the individual needs of all your staff and what's important to them. And then I'm a big proponent of creating responsibility. Most people thrive when they have some sense of ownership and creating that ownership on a personal level.
Oh, Jerry had a question. I was just responding to him Jerry, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, hi Tyler. What I wanted to say was, as I travel and I meet a lot of these small business owners, what I see is that they're having problems competing. You know, you're talking about the very small business owner, the mom and pops type restaurants. They're having problems competing with the mid-range and the large restaurants because they can't pay. I understand what Jay said, that they try to do all that good stuff. They just not able to pay at the rate that these largest businesses can. So they have a problem keeping staff. Their staff go to who's paying the most money. So when they ask me, what do they do to try hiring family members? That's sometimes not a good thing to do. And so, you know, so
Richard does a great.
I tell them that I said hiring family members is probably not a good thing because you look at aunt and uncle and not the boss. So my question is, when I talk to these small businesses, and these are across the state of South Carolina, the small ones, you know, in these small towns like the Orangeburg, the Bowmans, you know, the Branchvilles, they just can't keep good help. I'm dealing with a client right now that had to close their restaurant down because they could not staff the restaurant. They just couldn't do it because they're leaving for higher pay. So what do you do in a situation like that?
Well, I think some of it you're not going to be able to control, right? I mean, I think some of it's just inevitable. Some people's main focus is, you know, I need this job to pay my bills. But I think it goes to Tyler's point on, you know, creating a interviewing process that takes time. Look, I mean, I've worked for large corporate style restaurants and owned and operated independent small locations. The hiring, you know, most of the time when we're in a small business setting, you hire quickly as possible because you just you need the personnel. But if you're willing to make sacrifices to go through a proper interviewing process and recruitment process, like where do I go to find the people that fit my mission and vision and culture, and where the amount of money I can or cannot pay isn't the number one factor why they're working there. It's obviously a factor. But you have to invest in the interview and recruitment part of it. I mean, and there's other things that are important to people in their employment outside of money. But again, I go back to scheduling. I go back to Tyler's point of like, is the work environment, because I mean, I could be making double. I mean, I think we've all been in a situation where you're making good money, but the work environment is toxic, right? And so, an advice to a small business owner that loses a good employee that you treated well, you respected their schedule, when you were able to compensate them more for what they did, you did, and you really treated them well. A lot of times, people will come back to jobs that because of that culture piece, the respecting the schedule piece, those other things that make people stay loyal to a position. But the truth is, a factor that is nothing that you can really do is if a person needs to make more money and that's what's motivating them to work and leave, that's a hard thing to overcome if you can't afford. It's just honest, kind of honest consulting. But like, yeah, I mean, but there's other factors that you have to make sure that you're creating for people, and that's why that prep work is so important. And a lot of times too, I'm kind of rambling, but a lot of times too, one of the challenges that small businesses make is not doing this in the beginning, because it's easier to do it before you open your doors than it is once you're fully operational and you just don't have time to like put together a training, recruitment, and retention plan. Because if you don't have that in place, it's hard to do that on the fly. I mean, it's just hard. So my biggest advice to people is that, either where you are now in your business, take time to do it, or if you're looking to expand, and that's why you're on this call or working with Climb Fund, before you expand, because I know one of our challenges with Black Bean Company, we went from one location to 4 or 5 locations in less than 2-3 years, but we weren't really ready for the growth because we didn't do all of the necessary upfront planning to grow properly. So having a growth plan is important too. Yeah.
Before you make any action in life, there's caveats, of course, you have to have some type of plan. Like, and you had, like, before you all came to the Climb Fund, you had to have a business plan to present. Right? And with the hiring process piece, I think one important variable is understanding how this potential candidate is motivated. And understanding how they're motivated, having plans in place to react to that. For example, if they're only driven by money and that's it, that is very tough to overcome. But maybe there's someone that has a family, for example, and feeding their family is important. Then maybe you help them create a food plan for them where they're getting X number of meals weekly from your business to help feed their family. Or maybe education is important to them and you work with them to find educational opportunities that you can help. Maybe it's a certificate, some sorts online, and you can use that as a tax write-off. Maybe you see great potential in these candidates and you're unafraid to offer equity. I mean, the number of times that great people have left restaurants because they've invested everything in them and the restaurant owner just puts a carrot in front of their face saying, oh yeah, we'll give you a piece one day, but one day never comes. Like, follow through with what you say you're going to do. I also think it's important to have a growth plan in place. Like, what are you looking to accomplish in this position and how can we help you get there? And help them get there. Don't just say it, do it. And then another piece I think that's important is your hiring pool and looking to your staff you currently have to help with that hiring pool. And I think incentive programs can be extremely effective, where on a referral basis of sorts, where, you know, maybe you have someone on your team that has a network, and if they bring in somebody after 90 days, they get a couple $100, whatever it may be, and lean on them, maybe not family, but someone that they know that could be effective. But at the end of the day, there isn't a one size fits all plan. It's openly and actively communicating, understanding the vision of that person, what they bring to the table, and shifting your perspective. Don't just say, what can you, don't have the attitude of what can this person do for my business? Have the attitude of what we offer to this person to help them grow. And create that equity and buy-in from them and create that loyalty. And I think you'll find yourself having a staff that really cares and believes in you, and they'll follow you, they'll fight for you.
Do you have a couple comments on that? Cause I.
Well, I like what Taylor or Tyler? I like what Tyler said, and one of the things that we do is we try to find out what it is that's important to the employee. Now, it could be that they like to go to the gym. So, I buy a gym membership as an advertisement, and I get to have Coastal Coffee Roasters name at this particular gym, Dead Little Fitness. Let them do their thing. And then, oh, you see it there?
I see that.
And then my baker goes in there and does all this working out that she loves to enjoy. Now she just, the way she looks at it, she just got a pay raise.
Right.
For a month. I got it as a deduction and it's legal.
Right.
That's the best part. So finding those win-win. Those that know me know that I am a win-win person. I need someone like you in our business to do that structure. And my son does a very good job, but needs a little guidance on like how to get those spreadsheets where they need to be. Because I mean, it's nice when every day that you wake up, you try to learn something new.
Mhm.
Or something that you can add to your life to make it a little better. I love what you said about the, some businesses are very hands-on, have to make every decision. My daughter nicknamed me 12 years ago a corporate hippie. I'm not really a hippie, but I'm not corporate in any means, but we have a corporation. But we wanted it where it was kind of not as, you do this, you're out, you know, it's flexibility, learning, teaching. And then I find myself as the leadership role is to guiding and teaching. Instead of saying, hey, my manager, you messed up, or you did this wrong, or you did that wrong. The why. And it's not what we say, it's how we say it. I know that sounds stupid, but it's extremely true that in an environment where we're so high stress, especially in food and beverage, it's like this all the time. We focus on the one negative rather than the 99 positives. It's hard to change your mentality to do that, to focus on that. We have a standing policy. I've hired people off the street because of how they smiled and how they interacted with me. And then they came in for interview and then they stayed with me for like 5 years. And we're a stepping stone, you know, it's a cafe, restaurant. There's a few that have been there a long time, but for the most part, it's traditional food and beverage as far as they're going to school or it's a little extra money or they're just migrating through. But you can teach, like that one lady said, you can teach all those other things, but you can't teach how someone presents themselves. And it's like, you need more than a pulse. We're having this conversation tonight at our staff meeting.
For sure. Well, and I think, you know, and those are all really valuable things. It's also extremely important. You can't lose sight of your staff, A, being humans, and B, the hospitality piece. It's circular. Like, you can't expect your staff to provide great hospitality to their guests if you aren't providing the same hospitality to your staff.
Exactly.
And the same way we talk about service, you know, the way you greet somebody, the way you manage their experience, and the way you say goodbye. That should be the same thing with your staff. When your staff comes in, there should be some type of process, right? Whatever that, as an example, I worked at Lululemon for a year and they had this clearing process. Before you went and worked, period, you kind of had like 5-10 minutes to just get anything off your chest you wanted to get off your chest, have any conversation, just kind of exist, get in a good headspace, and then boom, you're there. How many times at a restaurant do you walk in, as soon as you walk in, it's just chaos? Right? It's just
Every day.
every day. Right?
When it comes in and it's not chaos, you're like, oh, where's the people?
But like,
Table 3 needs something.
the thing about, like, if someone walks into a full restaurant, which is great, but instead of them just rushing straight in, they just get a few minutes to collect themselves, settle themselves, be organized, you know, and then that smile you expect from your staff, share that same smile. Like, how many times is there an executive chef that's throwing pans and is just a jerk? Or that front of house manager that's over your back scrutinizing your every move? They want you to be friendly to people, but they're treating you like you're trash. Like,
Yeah,
it starts with up top.
Yeah.
I can actually attend to that, cause I worked at Chick-fil-A like 5-6 years ago, and I think one of like the biggest things like restaurants or with anything in like particular, I think particularly when we work with Jay working at the State House, like chemistry is everything.
Mhm.
Cause it's like if you have chemistry, you gotta have, like, find like way to have some type of common ground. As far as like with working with people, I think it's like you said, like just find a way to like to connect with people. I think what I've seen like working with like the restaurant industry, that there's what makes a great restaurant is people that find a way to connect with like their staff as well as working translated to with the customers. I've been in some restaurants where you can tell like there's no chemistry within the staff. Like
Mhm.
you can look like behind the counter, you feel like so like one person's like he's idle, like he's just looking around. Another person's like yelling at this other person, and there's one person that's like the front counter trying to put on a smile that act like you don't see what's happening in the back.
For sure.
And then it just gives off that like, and then then next someone's order is like late and stuff like that, and then someone writes a bad review and everything, and it's just like a trickle down effect. So I think like this is one of the may not be the number one thing, but the main thing is just finding that common ground, just find that chemistry among like within the staff. Okay, so it's like where do you get at? And what do you get at? Okay, you might do what he is able to do, but how can you all work together to make everything just like it's
sure.
completing the goal?
Well, you're never too busy to connect with your staff. And one thing I wish restaurants did more is having, once a month, sit down with each employee for
Mhm.
10 minutes and just see how they're doing.
You check it.
Just to check.
Jay has a comment on the computer, but Jay?
Yeah, and also, Tyler, one of the things I wanted to say, what's very important when we talk about hiring is also onboarding. That's your
Yes.
opportunity time to really present who you are, what your culture is, and
Mhm.
to bring that person on. I think a lot of small businesses miss this part. They don't do a very good job of onboarding new associates.
Mhm.
It's so important. That gives a really good time to talk to that person so you see where the cultures are. Another thing that we did when I was in banking was we had cultural ambassadors. I'm kind of different than the culture is now. We look at things differently. I think as you start to hire, especially teenagers, right? I think it's good to have that culture ambassador, something, I'm talking in reference to restaurants, someone who can relate, someone who can look at different things in different ways. And also with that comes that morning huddle. I'm talking with a restaurant owner right now, and I said, it's so important that in the morning time, you have a huddle with your team. If it's just one day a week, it's very important to have it on a Monday or Tuesday, where you set the week off. What your expectations of every employee, just like they should have an expectation of what the managers are going to do or what the owner's going to do. So I think that's very important. Onboarding, culture ambassadors, and having morning huddles to just get the week started off correctly.
And to your point, Jared, again, I think in our industry, I've fallen victim to it. Most of what I know now is because of all the mistakes I made. Like the main thing that especially as either restaurant owners and operators, that we always run into is that we don't feel we have enough time.
Mhm.
And I don't have enough time to do proper onboard. I don't have enough time to do these shift meetings. I don't have enough time to spend time recruiting and retention. I don't have enough time to put these systems in place. But if you don't make time, your business is going to be less successful. I mean, that, to go to Tyler's point earlier, a perfect example with me is those, I had these special, when we were doing the big contract at the airport. I had these special boxes, you only could get them from one place in the country, Bedford, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. And literally, I did all the orders, so we never missed anything, but that day in particular, we were running low on these particular specialty items. And I didn't put a proper enough system in place for my shift manager to, even though he should have communicated with me, did. But I didn't have the system in place at the time to make sure that we weren't completely out of this product, even if we got a big order that day. Anyway, so I had to get a plane ticket to Bedford, Illinois that morning. So we didn't run out of product, because one of my standards or my mission was, no matter what, we would always deliver whatever the client wanted at any cost. That was my mission for that contract. And so I flew, I mean, I needed like 10 of them. It wasn't even a lot. Needed 10 of them, and it was like a $700 ticket. But for me, that was important. But it was a lesson that I learned. It was an expensive lesson, but it was a lesson I learned about, inventory management, that I had to make sure that not only my shift manager knew, but also my hourly employees knew, when we get to a certain threshold, and we did it on a spreadsheet, and also put a marker, like a physical marker, where we stack those containers are. Look, it took me extra time, but I knew I
It
didn't.
came down to a certain point.
Right, it was like a red line. If it ever get to that red line again, and I have to go to Bedford, it's gonna be a problem. But I didn't do that upfront work that I should have did, and it ended up costing me $600 that day. And so the point I'm making is, you can't afford not to spend the time. I mean, it's better for you to, in my opinion, it's better for you to close on Monday and make sure that Tuesday through Sunday is good, because you're having staffing issues, than to not properly hire people. I mean, because like having a bad employee costs you so much more money than it is to just not have that employee.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, because especially in our industry, because we want a body, but it costs you more in the long run to hire a bad employee. With shrinkage, with them making products incorrectly, with them leaving in the middle of their shift or not showing up or always sick.
With this to the other.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly. Because to go back to Sarah Gell's point about I hire people for their culture and not their skills, you have to stick to that. I mean, like the recruitment, training, and retention piece, especially now when your pool of people is so much smaller, you have to invest that time.
You mentioned something earlier about looking at the numbers, and if 2% of your sales come in on a Monday, why are you open on a Monday type of thing? So we used to, those that know Coastal and know what we've done up in Somerville, it became a cultural center, not just for coffee, but even the evening hours. Before we opened up our brewery, we were open till 9 o'clock at night. We had the open mic night. We had a place where all the bands could come, and all these places were coming, and we would stay open later, especially towards the weekend. And always closed on Sunday. It wasn't a Chick-fil-A model. It was just we wanted everybody to have a break, including ourselves. When COVID hit, we had to pivot very rapidly, like a lot of other businesses. And we said, wait, we're a cafe. And I did what you said. I look at where your numbers are. I'm like, our money comes in, and the morning up till like just after lunch. After that, it's like that, there's a term for it, but that.
Point of diminishing returns.
Yeah. But it's in the food and beverage industry, what do they call that afternoon where it's like just dead, no matter what you do, whatever special you run, no matter what, no one's coming. It's just that. So I was like, why are we open past that and then open back up for a little bit? Why? Shut it down at 2. And we did that throughout the pandemic. It worked great. Now everyone's like wanting us to open back up. And I'm like, you know what?
It's not
With
right.
all of these other things that are going on, and the reason that we stayed alive is because we did that huge pivot. We were losing so much money on musicians and everything else, so.
That's a very important part. It's not always about how much revenue you're bringing in. It's equally about how you're controlling and managing your cost, right? Because that equals dollars at the end of the day. And when you look at sports as an example, you can take the Chicago Bulls, where Michael Jordan was there. You can have the most talented players, but there is still a coach, there is still a playbook, there are still adjustments, there are still minor details, numbers that are analyzed to make decisions, because you have to always have someone taking a step back and observing from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
Like the players are in the middle of it and the data exists for a reason.
Right.
So we're approaching 4 o'clock and we're gonna wrap this up, but I wanted to close on this comment that actually Tyler made in one of his emails, and I would like you to expand on the idea of remembering why you started.
Absolutely.
I think that's, an important thing that I think we can close on, and that everyone can throw in a couple of comments about, starting with you, Tyler, on what you meant by remember why you started.
We're all here for a reason, whatever that reason is to you, even today. And the reality is that operating a business is extremely difficult. It's costly, time consuming, stressful, but there's a reason you all decided that you wanted to take that leap of faith. And before opening the business, you were really excited. You had this idea, you had this belief, this passion that you wanted to share with the world, to the point that you decided you were going to risk it to do it. It's important to always come back to that moment and to remind yourself of that moment.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Thank you so much for those that came.
Oh, I was gonna say, just by listening to what all three said, I think one of the biggest things they can take away from this, that there's a difference between like growth and like swelling. And I think it's like from like a lot of like, kind of like what you mentioned with like, you realize you were growing more. We made those adjustments within the pandemic, and then what Jay said and what Tyler said, just as far as like, okay, saying, hey, sometimes, people pride themselves in having so many employees. But if you got a number of them that aren't really coinciding with the objective, what the mission that you have for for the restaurant, then what's the point at the whole thing? So I think it's just the fact that, just understand, okay, sometimes if you want to grow, sometimes you gotta cut away some of the weeds in this case. Maybe I might do better with less, or having, and not spending as much money as on some of the other stuff. So maybe some of the stuff that you were spending money on that you needed, you might not need at all. So that's just one promotion.
No,
The only last comment I have is thank all of y'all for your contribution to the greater Charleston area with your restaurants and breweries and cafes and all of that stuff. And obviously thank Climb Fund for we're all here because of working with Climb Fund. But I will leave you all with this, is that we all know that the past 2+ years have been challenging on our industry. But I'm more hopeful now on our industry than ever before. Because what I think the pandemic has taught all of us, to Brad's point, was that we figure out a way to still deliver good customer service and products to the community. And so just take what we've all learned from now that we're in a post-COVID world, and apply it. And don't get so stubborn about, oh, we were doing this before, like your clients, and then we're gonna go back to what we were doing that wasn't good for your overall business. What I've heard more than anything is that sustainable businesses, business that were really strong in their philosophy, with their financials, or from an operational standpoint, weathered the storm. And now that we're having inflation and labor issues, y'all will, without me and Tyler's expertise, y'all will figure out a way to weather the storm. It's gonna, at the end of the day, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna figure out a way to do it, and we'll be tools for that. But your businesses will be better because of some of the heartaches and stuff. So thank y'all. Tyler, thank you so much. I always feel like he's a lot smarter than I am. Which I love. Which I always love, that, to be able to collaborate with him.
Yeah,
Thank you all for
it's
being
a title though.
Thank you, everybody. And just so you know, that we have Tyler and Jay are available to support you guys. Just reach out. I'll be glad to connect you. And to be honest, Brad's available too. I can reach out. He's always available to help our clients as well. He's my original food and beverage consultant, I would say. So thank you, everybody. And look forward to working with you.
Thank you all.
Thank y'all.
Do something